The existence of social groups that differ on the basis of race, tribe, and nationality or religion carries the potential of competition and conflict between them. This plurality is both a reason for and an outcome of the human freedom to choose faith and religion, the basis of moral responsibility and final judgment. In this respect, religious plurality is one of the means to test and develop human capacities. People are required to overcome intergroup tensions and their potential negative outcomes through goodwill and the commitment to live together in peace and justice with their fellow human beings, whatever the odds. In other words, the response to diversity through positive engagement or dialogue is one of the major goals that the divine will has set for humankind. The larger part of this book is taken up with reflection on teachings of the Qur'an and the example, precepts, and practice of the Prophet, peace be upon him, relevant to the practice of dialogue, and on the light shed on dialogue by Islamic history. Prior to this reflection, in Chapter 1, we examined the meaning of dialogue as understood by key theorists and by practitioners. We distinguish dialogue from debate and discussion and clarify the meaning of interfaith dialogue. What is being argued for in this book on the basis of Islamic sources is not theological engagement with people of different faiths, but general meaningful engagement with diverse groups. Accordingly, our working definition of dialogue is meaningful interaction and exchange between people of different groups, social, cultural, political, and religious, who come together through various kinds of conversations or activities with a view to increased understanding. Chapter 2, focused on relevant material from the Quran, begins with a discussion of its particular instructions to Muslims to engage positively with the people of the book. That is, those others who align themselves with prophets recognized by Muslims. We then move on to discussion of verses relevant to dialogue with people of any faith or none. It is worthwhile briefly to note some of the key verses here, as they encapsulate the Quran's challenge to Muslims to accept diversity and to respond to it with righteousness and justice. Say, now the truth has come from your Lord. Let those who wish to believe in it do so, and let those who wish to reject it do so. Surah Al-Kahf, chapter 18, verse number 29. There is no compulsion in religion. Surah Al-Baqarah, chapter 2, verse number 256. Had your Lord willed, all the people on earth would have believed. So can you, O Prophet, compel people to believe? Surah Yunus, chapter 10, verse number 99. If God so willed, He would have made you all one people. Surah Al-Nahl, chapter 16, verse number 93. What we learn from these verses is that diversity was intended by God, and that it is not possible that everyone in the world would believe in the same religion. This requires us to learn to live together, which in turn necessitates dialogue. The following verses from the Quran show us the divine wisdom in such diversity, encouraging us to engage. O people, we created you all from a single man and a single woman, and made you into races and tribes so that you should get to know one another. In God's eyes, the most honored of you are the ones most mindful of Him. God is all-knowing, all-aware. Surah Al-Hujurat, chapter number 49, verse number 13. We have assigned a law and a path to each of you. If God had so willed, He would have made you one community. But He wanted to test you through that which He has given you. So race to do good. You will all return to God, and He will make clear to you the matters you differed about. Surah Al-Ma'idah, chapter 5, verse number 48. If your Lord had pleased, He would have made all people a single community. But they continued to have their differences, except those on whom your Lord has mercy. For He created them to be this way. Surah Hud, chapter 11, verse number 118 to 19. In chapter 2, we also reflect on verses which, on a superficial reading, might be construed as opposing dialogue. With reference to their occasions of revelation, we consider the implications of these verses for Muslims living in different eras and circumstances. We argue that the verses concerned with struggle against Jews, Christians, or polytheists do not govern our relations with any and all people belonging to these religions in any and all circumstances. Rather, they govern our relationships with only those people who follow the practice of those Jews, Christians, and polytheists who actively threatened the security of the Muslims when the verses were revealed. That is how the verses were understood at the time, and that is how that understanding was embodied in practice for centuries afterwards. In this chapter, we also explain that there is no contradiction between the concepts of jihad and of dialogue if each is properly understood. Chapter 3, on the basis of dialogue, provided by the life of Prophet, peace be upon him, explores examples of the courtesy, respect, justice, and compassion that he displayed in his dealings with people of other faiths and cultures. We give special attention to the Medina Charter, through which the Prophet secured political and legal arrangements facilitating peace, cooperation, and trust between diverse religious and cultural groups. The Prophet, peace be upon him, entered into a range of other agreements with individuals and groups of different religions, as well as entering into social and commercial relations with various individual Jews and Christians. We give a range of examples of the justice and generosity he showed in all these relationships, and which serve as a model for all Muslims in their dealings with people of other faiths and diverse cultures. We also elucidate the contexts in which the Prophet, peace be upon him, had to fight or punish people of other religions, explaining the implications of these incidents in different political and social conditions. Chapter 4 briefly considers what can be learned from the application of the religious teaching of Qur'an and Sunnah in the practice of the 4 righteous caliphs and after them of the Umayyads, Abbasids, Seljuks, and Ottomans in their dealings with non-Muslims living under Muslim rule. They give examples of compassion, justice, and respect shown to non-Muslims in particular historical incidents and in agreements entered into by Muslim rulers. We note the general faithfulness of early Muslim rulers to the principle that there is no compulsion in religion. We also briefly clarify the nature of treaties which granted protection and religious freedom to non-Muslim subjects of the Islamic State. In the very different contemporary world, Muslims must still respond to the challenges of pluralism and diversity. The Quran and Sunnah demand that Muslims engage in dialogue. The reality of globalization makes that demand all the more pressing. The rapidly improving technologies of communication and transportation are turning the world into a global neighborhood, and this process is accelerating, with new dimensions of interconnection continually being opened up. In today's world, Muslims, Christians, Buddhists, Hindus, and Jews are not clearly separated either by geographic location or by different political allegiances. If we maintain an attitude in the present time as if we were living centuries ago, we will be depriving ourselves of the opportunity to sustain the relevance of Islam amid present realities and isolating ourselves from the rest of the world. The isolation of the Muslim Ummah, its separation from people of different creeds and cultures, is undesirable from a religious perspective. It is also impossible in the global neighborhood the world is increasingly becoming. Therefore, we Muslims have to make our presence felt, take our place at the forums where global affairs are discussed, and be a party to decision-making processes in our shared world. As Muslims, drawing on our shared religious values as well as our distinctive and diverse national and cultural values, we can make a significant and positive contribution to the discussions and decisions that affect us all. As Muslims, it is our duty to enter into relations with others on the pattern set by the Prophet, peace be upon him. We are responsible for applying the example of the Prophet's, peace be upon him, life as a whole in our own lives, since he is our guide and model. Taking only his prayers or his relationship with Muslims into account would mean that we narrow or even betray our religion by adopting only what suits us and ignoring the rest. We need also to mirror his example of truthfulness and trustworthiness in his dealings with all people.